We just sat through an immense amount of detail regarding the shooting, a lot of information that we did not know before, and also the detailed charges that the suspect is now facing. 7 charges overall, aggravated murder, first-degree felony for discharging a weapon, as well as several counts of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and committing a violent act with children present. Perhaps most notable, what the county attorney shared there is just the immense amount of evidence that they have against this suspect. Really a staggering amount, not only DNA on the weapon, on the trigger, on the towel that was wrapped around the weapon, but on the cartridges that weren't fired, as well as these text message exchanges with his romantic partner, his roommate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have a number of people here to help us walk through all of it. David Challey and Laura Coates. We have Andrew McCabe and Tim Weininger with us as well. Andy, to you first, let's talk about the DNA. Because there is the weapon, right? They have the weapon, and it seems pretty clear that this is something that is, I don't know if it's passed down through the family by the text messages or what you have in this charging document. But it seems very likely it's been identified by the father, by one of the parents here. And talk to us about the DNA on all of these different items that authorities say have been linked to the shooter, or the alleged shooter here.
Yeah, the DNA evidence is devastating. We knew prior to the press conference that DNA had been recovered on a screwdriver found with the rifle, and also on the towel that the rifle was wrapped in. And that was pretty good. But boy, what they have is absolutely devastating. They have the defendant's DNA on the trigger. They have it on other places on the rifle. They have it on the fired shell casing. So that's the brass casing that's still in the rifle when they recovered it. They have it on 2 of the unfired casings, which is, that's from his handling of those things, either while he was etching them or sometime after. And of course, on the towel. So let's remember that at its core, put all the notoriety and the people and the politics aside, this is a relatively simple case. You're talking about a homicide in plain sight. Basically, you have to prove that was the gun that killed Charlie Kirk, and this is the person that pulled the trigger. And between the video capture that has him essentially fleeing the place where the shot was taken from, his DNA all over the rifle, and then his statements, the statements to the roommate, basically lay out the entire crime, from his execution of it on the 10th to his efforts to try to recover the rifle in the aftermath of the shooting, and to finally his direction to his roommate to delete all the texts, which apparently he didn't follow, and also not speak to the police, which those added additional charges onto this information in the form of obstruction of justice. So very, very strong case. In a normal circumstance, there is no chance that this case would ever go to trial. It would be pled out. That's my opinion. But here, because of the notoriety of this case, the people involved, the politics, pretty clear that the state is pursuing the death penalty. So they may just be compelled to go to trial, no matter whether or not the defendant even seeks some sort of a negotiated plea.
Laura, I'm curious to get your perspective on that, but I just want to note for our viewers, one of the text messages that stands out that implies premeditation, the roommate asking the suspect, "How long have you been planning this?" A bit over a week.
Unbelievable to hear the way in which this has all been laid out. I mean, the methodical approach by this prosecuting team, which includes some of the best in Utah, to describe with great detail not only the planning, but the execution and the capture. His own mother recognized him based on the videos that was put out. She told her husband, who also doubted their son enough to say, "Send me a photo of the rifle." That was a really important moment there to show you about the credibility aspect for any so-called trier of fact, whether it be a jury or otherwise. His parents doubted that this was not him. And then people often talk about hearsay, this idea that hearsay can't come in. Well, it's not hearsay? A defendant's own statements. Why? Because the premise of hearsay is that you're not able to test or confront your accuser and test the credibility of a statement. But if it's your own statement, that can come in. And so everything we saw here from these text messages that more than implicate him, that talk about the decision to plan, that describe and even reference the gun, talking about the grandpa's gun done just fine today, talking about the bullets as memes and what was written on them, the idea of saying what he had done, all of these things could come in, even if he's not saying to the officers, I did it, handcuff me, take me away right now, it all comes in. That's all important for them to lay out even so, because here in this country, as the prosecutor noted, we do not have the absence of due process. They still have to meet their burden, and he said it's welcomed, it's their honor to do so, but they have to lay out every single stage of this. And on the idea of the mother and the father and the statements being made, I hear cooperating witnesses. I hear people who are going to push that needle beyond a reasonable doubt for any jury that hears about what they have seen and what they've heard. But also, one thing that was really important here is we've heard a lot contextually about the roommate, a relationship. We've heard conversations about what his motive may have been. But the prosecutor doesn't have to prove a motive. They have to prove what Andy laid out, that this was the person who committed this crime. But I want to note one more thing, and that is the aggravated murder charge. The aggravated murder charge comes from who was also present in the area. You heard him go to great lengths to describe the format that Charlie Kirk's used, the accessibility, the prove me wrong tour sort of phenomenon of somebody in front of him asking a question, children nearby. He described the trajectory of the bullet that passed by even the person who asked Charlie Kirk the last question he heard and he responded to, children being nearby. These are sort of the aggravated circumstances that appeal and apply to being able to say this goes from just even the horrific charge of murder to showing who else was also vulnerable, even if those people were not struck.
Yeah, clearly at risk, and they really spelled that out. Yeah. I wonder what you thought, David. There was a lot of discipline in this delivery, and we have not seen that uniformly, I think you would say. And the county attorney, Jeff Gray, was asked, essentially, the FBI saying so much, has that hampered the investigation? And he left it pretty limited in his response, but I thought it was telling, where he basically said, as attorneys, we typically like to control that information to preserve a fair jury and a fair trial. They're the ones who have to do the work here, right, and prosecute.
He was also asked about his communication with the Trump administration the Cox administration in Utah. He said he felt no undue pressure from anybody. He was doing his work here to gather the evidence and file these charges, but that he was keenly aware of how the Cox administration and the Trump administration and the governor and the president felt about these circumstances, because he was able, like all of us, to see that play out in public over these last many days. But he said that did not influence him. I thought that was interesting to hear that there had been, of course, communication with both the Trump administration and the Cox administration.
Tim, to you, when the county attorney was asked about any sort of track record of online radicalization for the suspect, he said that he was not aware of any information related to that. I'm curious to get your thoughts when you heard that.
Yeah, and first of all, thanks for having me. If the government, the prosecutor not being aware of any evidence of radicalization is, I think, interesting, because the bullet casings speak directly from the internet. What I was pretty clear here, I thought was abundantly obvious, was that this person was radicalized from the internet, from the deep, dark places of the internet. And I worry what comes next. So if you think about one side and the hatred that they're feeling against the other side, and now coming out and saying that, well, yeah, this person had this political belief and they were worried about how they were going to respond. Now I'm worried about the other side coming out and saying, well, they got one of us, and now we have to retaliate. And the conversation happening right now in the online spaces is pointing things at the other side. And now I think it's pretty clear that this person was their political persuasion. The other political persuasion is going to be rallying around, circling the wagons and saying that, no, they got us. I'm worried, and I desperately hope that it doesn't come to that there's some retribution happening in response. But that's the conversation that's happening right now online, unfortunately.
It's very interesting and certainly pertinent to this. You can tell from the text messages of the alleged shooter with the roommate here. If you all could stand by, we're just going to reset so that folks know where we are, because so many developments have just happened here. Just moments ago, Utah prosecutors listed out the charges that have now been filed against Charlie Kirk's suspected killer. The Utah County Attorney saying he will be seeking the death penalty after walking through each of the 7 counts, including aggravated murder.
I am filing a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. I do not take this decision lightly, and it is a decision I have made independently as county attorney, based solely on the available evidence and circumstances and nature of the crime.
The attorney then going on to read aloud a text message exchange the suspect allegedly sent his roommate, who he was in a romantic relationship with. The suspect in that exchange allegedly admitting to the killing, saying, quote, "I had enough of Kirk's hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out."